Welcome to Just a Social Worker podcast with your host, Lori Eltred, licensed clinical social worker and therapist. Welcome to the podcast that's going to talk about social work in very real ways. We're going to talk about the things going well, the pressing issues and needs, and things that we really need to change about social work. I hope you enjoy our conversations, the insights, the thoughts, and even some of the actions we can take to make our profession, our lives, and our worlds better. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, welcome to Just a Social Worker podcast with Lori Eltred and my guest today, who is Taryn Sinclair, owner of Raven Wise Counseling here in the Grand Rapids area in Michigan. Welcome, Taryn. I like always to start with my guests that I talk to just have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their journey in social work and maybe what led you to where you are now. So I'll hand that off to you and let you chat about that.
Absolutely. So my journey to social work is long and storied. Could probably fill this whole podcast. But to keep it short and brief, I grew up in a household with intergenerational trauma, and that led to me receiving my own services at my local CMH. And then as a result, um, I made some not the healthiest choices with my bachelor's degree, and it led to me needing to get a master's. And I felt like, social work would be a really, really good option for me, eventually being a therapist. And what really confirmed that was being able to be a peer support at the same CMH that I received services at. And so that's probably the shortest way that I could wrap that up. But yeah, now I am a therapist and finding that I'm using the experience from both being a peer support and a therapist to give back to people that have similar experiences to me.
Yeah, that seems to be a pretty common story for most folks that I've talked to, most folks that I know in the field is either we had a social worker at some point in time in our lives, like as a kid or teen, maybe even as an adult. We had family that might have had a social worker or involvement in one of the various systems, or had my other one I'm starting to hear a lot of is like they had a parent or an aunt or kind of like an older, maybe uncle, older kind of relative that was in the social work field. And that's kind of what's pulled them, into the field. So I know you said it's been a long process, kind of an evolved process. How long do you think you've been kind of in the field at this point?
As a therapist or in the mental health field, period?
Just in the mental health field in general.
10 or 11 years? I can't remember if it's been a decade exactly, almost, or 11 years exactly at this point.
Okay. Okay. And what led you into private practice? Why has that been part of your journey?
I would love to say that it was like some like really like altruistic reason. It was more so that I have a lot of like goals that I want to do for my community, and I like to work in a certain way to get those things done. And private practice just really gave me the autonomy to do that. So like for instance, my practice, like we reinvest all of the profits that we make. So while I pay my bills for my clients, I don't pay my bills at all from what I collect from my clinicians. All of that gets reinvested. And so I couldn't have done that if I didn't own my own practice. Like, I don't know if you know, like what happened to the Pride Center in GR, but
Yeah.
being able to essentially work so autonomously has allowed me to invest a significant amount of money into helping them with that project, labor. It's allowed my husband to go help out at the Pride Center and sign up for pretty much whenever. Like, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of these things if I didn't
Yeah.
run my own practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely saw what happened to the Pride Center from the flooding, and they got flooded from as well as the Grand Rapids Trans Foundation. So they've took a hit, and really, the ways that a lot of nonprofits don't have tremendous money, capital, we don't have a lot of resources sitting in the bank account just waiting for a flood or some type of kind of natural disaster to happen. So
Especially
you've
queer ones.
yeah, especially. Absolutely. And, you talk about you've reinvested a lot back into the business. Is that kind of what's worked really well? I know you and I had our conversation, and I'm happy to talk about that, about the 1099 versus W-2 struggle that we see in the private practice field. But
Yep.
does that really work for you in terms of that reinvestment? Is it really allowed for you to kind of be creative, do things that you really are passionate about?
I think it depends on how we define work, right? Like, I was talking with one of my colleagues, ironically enough, last night. Like, if I was measuring, like, does this work from a point of view of, am I able to work a reduced caseload and, significantly pad my income off of my clinicians? No, because I don't do that, right? It requires me to work just as much as they do and do this practice on top of it. But if it's defining work like to get to my goals of like being able to help my community, being able to have some essentially disposable income, since I don't view it as my income, I view it as like the community's income. Yeah, absolutely. Like it works really, really well for that. And honestly, that's why I chose the for-profit route too, is I didn't when I saw what happened at the Pride Center, I didn't have to go ask anyone, can I donate to this? I just could. And so in that regard, it works really, really well. And since that's my goal, I would say it would work really well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I talked there, kind of in our community, there's a lot of 1099 group
Hmm.
practices, ones that have been here for a really long time, ones that have popped up not so long ago, and then kind of new ones that always seem to be emerging. And that really big struggle with the group practice model using tens and, in full transparency, the likely exploitative nature. I mean, based on my own experience, based on what, I've kind of talked about with other social work friends, and that really, the money that's being taken, then the money you have to pay for taxes, and really that take home, I mean, pay that you get is pretty low. And I don't know if folks are always aware of that versus, W-2. You do get some of those benefits. It doesn't also come without, trade-offs and things like that. And so I know we talked a little bit about kind of how you have your group practice, and like you had said, that the ways you kind of reinvest, but also pay your folks a living wage. What
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
I was going to say, no, I was going to ask what kind of led you to that real way of structuring your group practice versus the real plethora of other examples out there.
So again, like full transparency, my practice is fully 1099s. It was the freedom. Again, I wanted to extend the same type of freedom that I'm extending to myself to my clinicians, or rather the clinicians on my team. I'm working on changing that language because I myself have worked at places that did feel exploitative. And I think if I'm being honest, like there's a culture in our whole field starting in college of exploitation. So, for example, we're also one of the only places that pays our interns. From the ground up, I don't believe in this idea of, despite what I do, forcing people to do free labor. Like, if people want to do free labor in their community, absolutely. Like,
Mhm.
but it shouldn't be a cross to bear in order to get access to our field, like with our interns or our fellow clinicians. And so I hear about some of these practices that are taking 45, 50. I mean,
Mhm.
recently I even heard of one that's taking 55%.
Mhm. I've heard
it,
of those too.
how is this person how is this person supposed to live with that? And
Yeah.
so on average, the clinicians um, that are on my team make about 75 to $90 an hour. I can't say like it's exactly 75 because depending on their caseload and what
Mhm.
insurances their caseload is made up of, but I I don't need to exploit them.
Mhm.
And I think again, not doing this as my money to pay my bills with, it's really relieved a lot of that burden. It's not every dollar that I don't make off of them is one more dollar for me. It's like I'm helping my community, whether it be by paying them as well as possible or by reinvesting that money. It relieves such a huge burden. And it even allows me to invest in like their education. Like in the last year alone, I've invested almost $17,000 into the education and the training of the clinicians on my team because so many of them didn't feel comfortable pursuing something that would have led to expanding their career, helping them focus on their own specializations. They didn't feel comfortable spending the exorbitant fees that a lot of these trainings cost
Mhm.
now. And so it benefits me, it benefits them, it benefits my practice, it benefits my practice's reputation to invest in my team.
Yeah, and I've seen some of those pretty high rates too, where they're taking that, big percentage. And again, I mean, just kind of talking about that, they're already taking that big percentage, and then you have to pay about 25% up from that
Yep.
then into taxes. And so it's like then you're getting 15, 20, maybe 25% of that income, and how so much of that really pairs with what we get starting in undergrad and grad school, right? Of like, you don't go into social work for the money. This is, when we get paid low wages, low reimbursement rates, it's that old. And I heard that, and I've been in the field about a little over 20 years. And so I remember hearing that in grad school. It's like, well, what do you expect? That's what you signed up for. Like, and the ways that like foundation gets laid so that I think we get more and more just willing to take low wages, low reimbursement rates,
Yep.
and right. And coupled with more and more these healthcare plans only want to take social workers, right? That, we've kind of made this shift into therapy that I know our profession didn't necessarily start out doing. And yeah, just I think sets lots of us up. You do your internship for free, and it's only been relatively recently that there is money available or that folks think about paying their interns. But, to even ask for that when I was in my internship was like, I asked for, I don't know, like something like a unicorn to appear or something like that, just you were just kind of looked at so strangely. And it's good to hear that like kind of practices are out there that are really trying to make the work sustainable, paying interns because
Yeah.
interns are very necessary in practices. And you gotta to get your to get your feet wet and learn, you gotta start somewhere.
Well, it's like people forget what it was like to be an intern sometimes.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
I had 2 jobs and school and was an intern. If my internship had even paid me minimum wage, I could have let go of one of those jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't share this because our field ain't always the most transparent,
Mhm.
but the interns get paid for their
Mhm.
sessions, for their Medicaid
Mhm.
clients. It's
Mhm.
it's not like the practice is taking a huge loss, like,
Yeah.
and so why can't we reinvest some of that into the interns? Like,
Mhm.
why can't we make their life a little bit easier instead
Yeah.
of this mentality of, "Well, I suffered, so you need to suffer."
Yeah.
Why not,
Yeah.
"I suffered, I don't want you to suffer."
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that whole thought and idea is so frustrating because I don't wanna suffer, absolutely. I did have to in the beginning, but I also don't wanna see people suffer. It's just so antithetical to, like, our values of, like, "Why to suffer?" And I couldn't, pay my stuff or I was often not doing any better than, some of my clients, like, financially because I was having to work all of these jobs or get support in various ways, and you would think that even by supporting interns and like new social workers, that also will benefit us because if they're getting paid, all of that stuff can kind of shift upwards to, to our pay rates, to our reimbursement rates. So
Well, and our
yeah, I've never
clients
really
too.
understood that. And what?
And our clients too. Happy
Yeah.
clinicians lead to good work. Well taken care of clinicians leads to good work. And
Yeah.
all of that benefits whatever practice they're working at. Because
Hmm.
when a clinician is at, like, for instance, my practice, Raven Wise Consulting, like, clients will talk about how they receive services from this therapist. But
Hmm.
they don't go, this therapist in their practice. They go, Taryn at Raven Wise Consulting.
Right. Right.
It's good for everyone.
Right. And, if you're an individual who's not being able to meet your bills, right? And we know now, I mean, just cost of living, kind of housing prices, rent prices, all of that is just crazy high and astronomically high. And also, if you are a social worker not able to meet your basics, that's going to show up with your interactions with your clients because you're going to come in stressed and a bit dysregulated. And maybe even acting in ways that might not be terribly ethical, right? If, you're needing a day off because you're really struggling, but you show up and some of that impacts, your client or you talk to your client or act, kind of in a way that's not helpful in any ways, maybe even harmful, right? Getting irritated or short or snippy. It's like that also, you're right, absolutely benefits our clients when we can meet our own basic needs.
No, absolutely. The culture that we all start out with in school of the self-sacrificing social worker, I think in an ideal scenario in a story, it sounds great. But
Hmm.
the reality of expecting a whole profession to martyr itself is that the profession gets smaller, the work
Hmm.
gets worse, and that has ripple effects,
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
continue, especially when social workers and our siblings in the LPCs, the LMFTs, like, we are the backbone of most of our social service systems. And so if the backbone isn't taken care of, what happens to the rest of the body?
Yeah. It doesn't generally stay very healthy. doesn't generally stay upright. I mean, there's a lot of collapsing, disintegration. I think, and we see a little bit of that now, folks wanting to go right from, understandably, right from their undergrad or their graduate degrees, and they're wanting to go right into private practice. And the real ways that there are workforce shortages at CMH, at in child
Mhm.
welfare. I mean, those are really hard jobs to begin with. And we take the newest clinicians and throw those individuals in those jobs, which is kind of a whole other conversation. But the real way people just, because of pay, because of lack of flexibility, they just don't, they're not going into those roles anymore. And yet it's still needed because people are still in pretty desperate, situations right now with costs and just all of the complex dynamics happening in our communities.
No, absolutely. I can't blame anyone in a society that by design ekes out as much as it possibly can
Mhm.
from someone before it throws them away. I
Yeah.
can't blame anyone for going, okay, if I go into private practice, you're saying I'll, like, from the start, make 2 to 3 times as much
Yeah.
as the CMH. Like, I can't
Yeah.
blame anyone for doing
Mhm.
that, but then all these systems suffer, and the clients that only have access to those systems suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just the ways I think our profession isn't immune from capitalism, right? Trying to get as much as we can from the workers, but also at the same time, we're really trying to, address real systemic barriers, even though we're really like deeply involved and it's deeply embedded, kind of in our work. So yeah, it's such a tricky experience to try to navigate and to keep ourselves healthy, to help keep help our clients to be healthy, meet our basic needs, have time off, pay student loans. I mean, it's such a tricky balancing act.
I mean, you and I talked before about
Mhm,
my belief that some of our peers are maybe better suited to a business master's than a social work
mhm, mhm.
master's, but I guess that's the culture.
That has become the culture, absolutely. So, who are you working with in your practice now? Like, what are those folks that you're seeing in your own practice, that your teammates are seeing, that you're seeing?
Like, do you mean like the client population or like what
Yeah,
community organizations we're partnering with?
both would be lovely. So, who are you seeing in terms of clients in your practice? And then, yeah, I'd love to hear about community partners you're working with as well.
So, overall, our practice's long term goal is to help fill some of the gaps in substance use treatment. So, one of the benefits of not collecting from my practice is it puts me in a position where I am slowly seeing it accumulate. And we will be able to hopefully next year or the beginning of 2028 open our first sober home.
Nice.
That's what the
Mhm,
majority of this is going to go to as a down payment on a home to fill in the gap there. And then when it comes to like client populations, there isn't a standardized like population across the team because part of encouraging that autonomy is I want them to like their work
mhm,
and no knock on any particular client population, but some people love working with neurodivergence and other people
mhm,
don't. Some people
mhm,
like myself specialize
mhm,
in borderline personality disorder and attachment, and some people don't. And so there's not really a population across the team. The one issue I can say every single one of us works with is trauma, but that's
mhm,
so broad. So
mhm,
many different types of trauma. And so that would probably be the only thing that ties us together other than our shared belief systems about how to interact with clients. And as for our community partners, oh gosh, I mean, at this point, we are partnering with Every Woman's Place, Rave, Grand Rapids Pride Center, Voices of Flat River Pride. Um, there is a local music festival that I'm excited to partner with called the
mhm.
Smiling Acres. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone and I'm going to hear about it and I'm going to deserve to hear about it. But
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm forgetting someone and I'm always open to working with more people. A strong network is really the best thing that we could do at this point to help people is like establish those referral systems, establish those networks. I help these organizations and then when they have someone that they need to send a client to, they send it my way, and then long term that gets fed into our first sober
Mhm,
home and,
mhm.
maybe our second. But I think I answered that question,
Yeah,
right?
no, you did lovely. And you can send me those if you want to. You can email me the list of folks. I can drop it into the show notes if people are interested in learning more about just different communities within our area. So the music festival as well, if people are interested in checking that out, I can throw those in the show notes. And then maybe that'll get you off the hook a little bit of forgetting somebody of like, I didn't
I hope
verbally
so.
do it, but it's in the show notes. We're okay. We're okay. So yeah. And, and it's sometimes hard when we have got kind of, multiple kind of irons in the fire and in no way being disrespectful, which I don't think that that's kind of your intent at all. But when we got some things happening, sometimes folks get not intentionally, but just misplaced a little, but we won't forget them
Yeah.
at all. So have you kind of, I know we talked a little bit about kind of your work now being a lot with trauma, and you're right, trauma is a very broad, kind of category. It encompasses a lot of things, looks very differently depending on, kind of groups and intersectionality and, kind of ways of identifying. Has there been, and we talked about this a little bit, kind of other work that you've done that you've really enjoyed doing? I know maybe not doing so much of now, but have in the past.
Like, do you mean like community work or career?
Career work, we can start there, or even community work. I know you had said, you were doing some work in sex therapy and that being something you had an interest in and worked in the community for a while. But also, I'd love to hear about just, yeah, some of the community aspect of that too.
So career-wise, I mean, starting there, it, honestly, out of all the work that I've done that I sometimes miss the most, it's not even like therapy work. It's when I was a peer support.
Hmm.
There was a relatability that I was able to dip into with clients that is just inappropriate as a therapist. Not that we can't relate to our clients, but there's a
Hmm.
very real reality of the difference between,
Hmm.
it's literally in the name, a peer support and a
Right.
therapist. That kind of close the gap
Hmm.
sometimes between me and the people I was working with in a way that I can't do as a therapist. Therapy wise, I started my career as a children's therapist. I won't lie, I don't miss that as much. Like
Hmm.
the children were amazing. Parents, not always so much.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
And then from there, yes, I did do quite a bit of work in like the sex therapy space, specifically with kink aligned individuals and
Hmm.
non-monogamous individuals. And it's not that I don't do that now, but just not even of my own making. My
Hmm.
client population, people with BPD and attachment issues just kind of
Hmm.
chose me and I love the
Hmm.
work. And so over time, I've just transitioned more out of one space and more into another. Community work that sometimes I miss is my very first piece of social work, long before I even had a social work license, long before I was a peer support, was volunteering with Crisis Text Line. I haven't done that in a few years, but that, I mean, considering how much I loved working in the crisis space with, peoples that have maybe some higher needs, self-harm, suicidal ideation, like that should have been my indicator that I was destined to work in like
Hmm.
cluster B and borderline personality disorder work. But no, that was just so meaningful. And I don't even as like don't get me wrong, the work was meaningful, but I think
Hmm.
it was my first taste,
Hmm.
like being involved and helping and like the gratitude that comes with being giving, the gratitude towards the self and the work. And so I think that's what I miss the most is like that first taste of something.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and isn't that true how there is that kind of evolution of we'll start and then we kind of evolve in different areas in different ways, right? Of like how
Hmm.
sometimes even clients or particular groups find us, not that we're like, I'm going to start out here. Cause I think often lots of us start out at a particular point, but that's not, our careers aren't very linear. It's like you start here and then you
Yep.
kind of go over here, and you're over here and, with different groups and different programs, even different systems. So yeah, I can definitely see that as part of a social work career. It's been my experience as well of people finding me or especially remembering your first social work jobs and that yeah, that first like kind of taste
Yep.
or experience or like foray, kind of into it as a professional and the things that I thought and things that I knew versus when I look back on that younger version going, "Oh goodness, you had so
No,
much
and
to
it's not
learn."
that we're jaded,
Yeah.
cynical or anything like that, but it's that like I guess you'd say the hope isn't optimism, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
optimism of like youth in an experience,
Mhm.
right? Like not
Mhm.
youth in age, but like just being new. It's like everything's exciting, everything is powerful, everything is
Mhm.
impactful. And then obviously when you do something for a while, it becomes less so because you get used to it. You
Yeah.
adapt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of adaptation and flexibility, I think, that you learn as you get some more experience. Just get experience, just get a little older, right? I know as you kind of get that comfortability and you see things and you also realize like most of us are struggling with kind of the same type of stuff, no matter where, kind of what group or what experience, whether we're, coming from more urban or rural area, but most of us are struggling with wanting to fit in and belong and wanting to feel good about ourselves and wanting to have connections and friendships and, community of some sort. So that it definitely has been my experience too within social work. So how, we've kind of talked about the professional. How about you? How are given all of the things happening in the world? I mean, there is a shit ton of things happening in the world, right? Like
That's what I
to
was going
be
to ask. Like,
conservative.
which thing?
I'm like, it's more like what things are not happening, what houses and what fires are not happening
Uh,
at this point in time. But I mean, how are you kind of taking care of yourself given, I mean, we're seeing attacks on, and real eliminations of DEI, right? This real deep, pervasive desire for erasure, within the trans community, lack of really trying to completely gut and get rid of gender affirming care and attack on women's rights. I mean, there's a whole list I could probably go down besides what's going on in the Black and brown, the immigrant communities, just the devastation. So how are you taking care of yourself well?
I mean, I could lie to you and say amazingly,
Yeah.
but, transparency, that's an area that I have to work on.
Yeah.
A same colleague that I mentioned earlier, I was talking to her last night, and I struggle myself as a person who I'm relatively unaffected by most of these things, or the things that I am affected by. I have enough protections in place that
Mhm.
my effect does not look nearly as affected as other people.
Mhm.
And so when I'm at home, not worrying about my bills, not worrying about the struggles that other people have, I personally struggle with like a real feeling of like I could be doing something right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unfair that I have found myself in this position when so many other people don't.
Yeah.
And so the self-care aspect and the taking care of myself is something that I do struggle with. Like I'm not burnt out, but I could be doing better. But that would have to unfortunately would likely come at the expense of some of these other things that I am involved in and working on. And I'll be honest, I'm not willing to do that. And so if it means that I'm more tired than some people, so be it.
Mhm.
If it means
Yeah.
that I work myself into an early grave, well, then at least I did good work.
Okay. I do identify with that feeling of like I feel like I'm not doing enough or I should be doing more. I hear that I hear that internally. I hear that with my colleagues and friends. I hear that with the folks that I supervise of that feeling of like I should be doing more and yeah, and trying to take care of yourselves well has really
Mm.
it's challenging. It feels at this point in time there are so many things that we could get involved to a point
Yes.
of exhaustion and really really stretching ourselves thin and so it's tricky to navigate cuz I think I'm probably the same. I try to take good care of myself and some days I feel like, I'm doing a good job and then other days I'm like, yeah, no. I don't even know
Yep.
I don't even know if I learned how to take care of myself well, but yeah, that's so hard, I think, kinda given everything that's going on, and especially if it's, given the proximity, right? I mean, I also have tremendous privilege and, like, how in some of the ways, I present and some of the, those privileges of, like, having enough to pay my basics and, not h in being a white person and kind of all of those identifiers that it is it's challenging. It's really
No,
challenging to find that balance.
and I'm sure this is something that you agree with from the sounds of it, like struggling with
Mhm.
the same thing that I do, where it's like, I do not have these expectations for other people, right?
Yeah.
If someone else says, well, I'm involved in this thing and I'm involved in this thing, but I need to rest every now and then, I'd be like, of course you do.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely you
yeah.
do.
Do the same.
And then my brain's like, "But not you. No,
Right,
no,
yeah.
you need to go do more." And the way those expectations don't transfer is definitely something that I personally have to work on, is, like,
Mhm,
that breakdown of, and not that I'm looking down on other people, but
mhm,
more so not extending the same level of grace to
mhm.
myself that I extend to other
Yeah,
people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do the same thing. I'm like, you should really limit your, social media and be careful about what you're reading and, call your representatives and, use your financial resources if you have extra. And then I find myself doing a lot of like on social media or reading a lot of political stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some weeks I'm good about calling my reps and letting them know what I think. And then some weeks, I get busy with other things and don't. So yeah, I mean, it is, I think, trying to be a social worker, take care of yourself well, and be, very politically active is like, it's a really
Yeah.
hard kind of like three-legged stool to navigate most days. I feel like I'm just on two and, things are very
Which
tippy.
way is it going to
So,
fall?
right, right. Which way is that going to fall? And I have a kiddo at home still. So then there's that aspect of like also trying to make sure I'm around and being a good, kind of present parent for him as well.
Which is
So
so
yeah,
much work.
yeah. Yep. It is. It is. And trying to help him understand what's going on in the world and, and answer his questions and, making sense of like, why are these people doing those harmful things to each other when a 10, 11, 12, even younger, they get how that is not very kind. But us as adults, we seem to have lost that ability to see grace and kindness and, check the real harm we're causing each other. Kind of
Mhm.
as we wrap, what would you like to kind of share, just knowing your journey, as a social worker, what you're, kind of the amazing work you're doing, kind of what would you like to impart? What are those nuggets, those pieces of information, like you kind of alluded to, that you're encouraging other folks to do?
Gosh. Be put on the spot like I have wisdom to share or something.
You do. You do. You
Um,
got some things, that really would be helpful to lots of us.
that it gets better. I know that's such a
Mhm.
cliche thing to say at this point, but we have the historical context to prove it,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
the Trump admins of the world are temporary. They don't feel
Mhm.
temporary,
Yeah.
but the arc of history really does bend towards progression. Like one of the things I've been telling clients is at one point, most of the countries in Europe were thinking that it was doomed and done, whether it be during the Spanish Inquisition or the Crusades. Like at one point, they thought that was it too.
Mm.
And now a lot of those countries are quite a bit ahead of us in progression
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
doing good things for the world. It, there's so many examples around the world of history of things feeling bleak and
Mhm.
then getting better. And as long as people get involved and they do things, they inevitably will get better.
Mhm.
Like it's only when we stand still and go, "Wow, that sucks," and turn away that
Right.
things continue to get worse.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That in perspective is very important, right? Like if we get to zoom out and look that things have progressively gotten better, not perfect, not where they really absolutely should be, but we've always kind of had this ebb and flow of things get better, we have advances in science and civil rights and and technology, but it's just this kind of ebb and flow where it's like we make progress and then it feels like we backslide a little bit and then we make kind of make some more progress. And so I think that's a good it's a good thing to hold on to.
I think people get
Right.
stuck in the here and now in their perspective. Like, I'm not gonna tell people, "Oh, it's gonna be all better in your lifetime." I don't think it's gonna be all better in my lifetime, but
Yeah.
not just about me. I think it can
Yeah.
be better in my lifetime, but it's about the people that come after me, and I think it will be better in their lifetime too.
Yeah. I hope so. I hope so. Somebody, I teach at the undergrad, and so I do see some amazing things that folks are doing, that they're understanding in ways that they're understanding the world that was very different than I did when I was that age. And so that always gives me hope. If you're sometimes floundering, like go check out
Yeah.
some 20-year-olds with
Well, just the
just
advancement of queer
yeah.
rights,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
especially with young
Yeah.
girls, you ask them things like, "Well, what do you think of, gay people or trans people?" And they're like, "What do you mean? What do I think of them?"
Right.
Perfect answer.
Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah, and the ways you have I think that younger generation has just got so much better inclusivity and
Yep.
and just, a really diverse like friendship group that, has been very welcoming and yeah, the ways of like, well, what do you mean? Like the ways in which like maybe my generation thinks of that so differently, when you ask that question versus, kind of kids in their, I say kids, adults in their 20s.
Yeah, I know the feeling that you're talking about,
Yeah.
though. It's like, nope, they're adults. I felt like I was an adult at that age.
Yeah.
Like, we got to
Yeah.
respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many of them, they're just like, what do you mean? What do I think that they're people? Like,
Right.
for some people, it's just become so normalized.
Hmm.
And I know it's not like that everywhere and
Yeah.
with every person, but there was a time where it wasn't like that with anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And anywhere, right? Or if it was very small, kind of clustered private groups and very underground. Like most things, it's like it's not that it never existed, it just was underground. So,
I mean, it
and
was what, 70 years ago that we could still institutionalize people for being queer. And here we
yeah,
are now. Most people, I'm not going to say all, most people would find that abhorrent.
yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, not to mention, having pretty broad access to gender affirming care, marriage, generally I can say not, being able to get employment, in different, kind of levels and different areas, different gosh, the word's escaping me. Kind of you can get it in different industries. That's the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. And, so much of that, yeah, inclusivity. So what would be a great way for folks, and I will put that in the show notes as well, for folks to get a hold of you or check out what you're doing or y- kind of see what's happening for you.
So we have our current website, and
Mhm.
within the next 2 weeks, we'll be launching a new one. It's just going to
Okay.
be ravenwiseconsulting.com.
Okay.
Um, they can email me. You're welcome to put
Okay.
my email in
Okay.
the show notes too. Um, honestly, I encourage people to reach out. Like, I am open to connecting with all sorts of people about things.
Mhm.
Like, I'm not the person that's like, "Oh, well, I'm only willing to partner with other nonprofits." Like, I
Mhm.
don't care if it's the local butcher and they just want to put a couple of business cards in their
Mhm.
shop. Like, great, call me, email me.
Mhm.
You never know who's gonna have an impact, and that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate you jumping on and talking to me today. And, I hope folks do get in and check out your website, reach out to you, make that connection. Cause you're right. I mean, it sometimes the supports, the connections come from very unlikely places. There's been, there can be really cool partnerships between different industries and groups and things that people are doing. So I will add
And the
all
perk
of
of
that in the
partnering
show.
with me
Yeah.
is all the money that I make gets reinvested into our communities. It's any referral you send my way builds resources. So
Yep. Good. Good. Well, thank you, Taryn, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.
you too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Just a Social Worker podcast with your host, Lori Eldred, LMSWC. All information in this show is not a substitute for therapy and is only intended for entertainment only. Should you need help, please reach out to 988 or your local mental health resource.